I grew up in a church setting, much like this one, and we had a youth club, and like most church youth clubs, at the centre of the hall was a ping pong table, a table tennis table, and I spent most of my youth running round this table, playing round the table, doubles, kings, enjoying the youth club, enjoying table tennis. But the big problem we had as youngsters was a guy called Daniel H. I won't tell you his surname, but he was the pastor's son, Daniel H. And Daniel, he was a helper at the club, and he'd been playing table tennis for 30 years, and he was basically unbeatable. So whenever a kid would come up against him, he'd just wipe the floor with them. And 20 years, I didn't beat him once. You may as well be hitting your ping pong ball against a wall. It would always be returned. And no doubt we've all experienced that at some point. You come across someone and they're just brilliant at whatever sport it is or whatever game it is, chess, Scrabble, whatever it might be. Well, throughout our studies in Mark, we've seen several confrontations between Jesus and the religious leaders, haven't we? The political elite in Israel at the time. They keep coming to him and they're trying to catch him out. And their aim is to get Jesus to say something that will incriminate him so that they can arrest him. They want to trap him using his own words. And in Mark 12, we get 3 scenes where Jesus is confronted by religious leaders. And they're trying to humiliate him and incriminate him. But just like Daniel H. back in the day, like Daniel H. could bat any ping pong ball away, Jesus is able to deal with all of their arguments. Remember last time we saw Jesus swat them away when it came to their questions about his authority. And he linked himself with John the Baptist's ministry, didn't he? And he asked them, look, well, you're asking about my authority. Let's talk about John. Was he sent by God or was he just a man? And of course, they refused to answer him because deep down in their heart, they knew he was sent by God and the people loved him. But the religious elite won't stop there, will they? They're going to try and catch him out again. That was round 1. But now they're going to take another 3 swipes at the king. So this morning, we're going to look at this first tricky question they set him. And we will draw our lessons as we go. So 3 points this morning. First point, a tyrannical tax, verse 13 to 15. There's been a lot in the news about tax this week, hasn't there? Will Rachel Reeves have to raise taxes in her next budget? If so, will she have a Margaret Thatcher moment? So some of this will go over some of your heads, you're too young. But if you cast your mind back to March 1990, in Trafalgar Square, a huge riot erupted. Traffic cones were thrown, buildings were set on fire. The police came out on horseback in protective gear, and Trafalgar Square was completely trashed by the end of it. And it was all because of what? Who remembers? Poll tax, yeah. And people weren't happy. No one likes paying tax, do they? But poll taxes are nothing new. And it's a poll tax that's the backdrop for this tricky question Jesus has to answer. So remember, it's Jesus' final week before he's going to die. He's in Jerusalem, and he's already caused uproar in the temple. He's thrown the tables over. He's been preaching. He's been teaching. And now he's in the temple courts. Verse 13 then, they sent to him some of the Pharisees and some of the Herodians to trap him in his talk. Last week it was the chief priests and the scribes and the elders who were trying to catch Jesus out. They failed, so now they send out some more foot soldiers. They send out the Pharisees and the Herodians. Verse 14, they came and said to him, "Teacher, we know that you are true and do not care about anyone's opinion. For you are not swayed by appearances, but truly teach the way of God. Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? Should we pay them or should we not?" Now, 3 things to notice here, right? First up, notice who's asking the question. It is the Pharisees and the Herodians. These are the same men who in chapter 3, verse 6 had joined together and were plotting to have Jesus killed. They were looking for any opportunity to get him. They hated him. They couldn't stand him. Second thing to realise is the Pharisees and the Herodians were natural enemies. So the Pharisees would have been very pro-Jewish. So think of the Scottish National Party or Plaid Cymru today. They want independence, right? They want self-rule. Well, the Pharisees were the same. They wanted self-rule away from the Romans. They would have been delighted in nothing less than Jewish independence. If the Romans had packed their bags and cleared off, the Pharisees would have been dancing in the streets. The Herodians, on the other hand, they loved Rome. They were men who'd been given authority by King Herod. They were part of King Herod's government. They were Herodians. And who'd put King Herod in charge? Well, it was Caesar, wasn't it? Herod was his puppet king. So without the backing of the Roman Empire, these Herodians had no power, no authority. Yet here they are, united with the Pharisees. They want to bring down Jesus. They can't agree on Rome, but they can agree on him. He's got to be silenced and killed. Thirdly, notice how disingenuous or fake they are, right? So verse 14, they came to him and said, "Teacher, we know that you are true and do not care about anyone's opinion. For you are not swayed by appearances, but truly teach the way of God." It sounds very polite and very complimentary, doesn't it? But think about it. If they really believed that Jesus was from God, if they really believed that he spoke nothing but the truth, then why didn't they listen to him? Why didn't they follow him? It's all just trying to butter him up, isn't it? They're just big fat fakers. What do they ask him? Well, they ask him about a poll tax. Now, I worry when I do this. But Margaret Thatcher, Peter Wiles ain't here today. If he sees her, he'd go nuts. Margaret Thatcher's a bit like Marmite, isn't she, right? Some people love her, some people hate her. There's no in between. But whatever you think about Margaret Thatcher and the poll tax, you can't argue with the fact that she was elected legally by the people of Great Britain. No one was accusing her of electoral frauds. So while the poll tax might have been annoying, you couldn't argue as a Christian that you shouldn't pay it, should you? Now, contrast that with the poll tax in Jesus' day. This wasn't a free and fair democracy, was it? Where the general public could shake things up every 4 to 5 years. If only, hey? The Romans hadn't gained power through the ballot box. No, they'd taken control through violence, through oppression, through tyranny. They ruled Judea with sword and whip. We saw a few weeks back, didn't we, that these people were not nice. The Romans were an unpleasant bunch. They didn't care about the Geneva Convention. There was no Twitter or BBC to hold them to account. They were cruel dictators. They controlled every layer of society. The government, the courts, the tax system, the army. So imagine for a minute, you are a first century farmer. You've spent all winter ploughing your field, removing the weeds, getting the soil ready. Your land is now ready to grow crops. And tomorrow you're going to go to market and buy some seed that you can sow. But when you get to market, a Roman soldier stops you at the gate and he says, "Well, there's a new tax, mate, a new farming tax. So empty out your purse." And you've saved 20 denarius to buy your seed. And he takes 10 of them. Yeah, that's the new farming tax, 50%. Well, now you're at risk, aren't you, of starving to death the next winter. And your money is put into the hand of this armour-clad, ungodly foreigner, a savage, a Gentile. And the money's not even going to help you, is it? It's not going to mean better bin collections or shorter NHS waiting times. No, it's not going to help the local schools. The money you've earned is going to go into the coffers of an evil tyrant in a far-off land. It's going to pay for his wars and his wives and his concubines. Think how livid you would be. Think how frustrated you would be. Would you riot? Would you rise up? Would you conveniently try and avoid paying any tax? And what would you think of people who made apologies for the Romans? Well, you know, they've got to keep the empire going somehow, haven't they? They've got to have secure borders. You never know when the barbarians are going to come. Would you respect Roman apologists? Or would you call them traitors? Well, that's the trap the Pharisees and Herodians have set for Jesus. If you back the poll tax, then the man on the street is going to turn against you. But if you back civil disobedience, well, now we've got an excuse to throw you in prison. How is Jesus going to navigate this tricky question? Well, second point, render to Caesar. Look at verse 15. But knowing their hypocrisy, he said to them, why put me to the test? Bring me a denarius and let me look at it. And they brought one. And he said to them, whose likeness and inscription is this? Well, just like coins today, ancient coins would normally carry a picture of the emperor on them. And they say, of course, this is Caesar's image. This is probably the coin Jesus had in his hand that he's actually looking at, right? Not this particular one, but one like it, right? Verse 17, Jesus said to them, render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. And they marveled at him. What does it mean to render to Caesar what is Caesar's? Well, to render means to give or to give back. So quite simply, Jesus is making the point that this money that they're all using, that they're all so upset about, that they're trying to use as a political football, well, this money doesn't actually belong to them. It's Caesar's money. Caesar's had it produced, he's had it stamped, he's had it circulated around his empire. It's his, it's got his image on it. And both the Herodians and the Pharisees and the general population are now all obsessed with this currency. They become gripped by little silver coins. And they're getting angry and frustrated about these little silver coins. In fact, Josephus, a Jewish historian, tells us that the poll tax eventually led to a large-scale Jewish uprising. And that uprising culminated in the Romans destroying Jerusalem in AD 70. The very temple that Jesus preached in would one day be flattened, in part, because of little silver coins. These little silver coins belonged to a kingdom rooted in this world, didn't they? They belonged to an empire that would one day fizzle out. In fact, you can see these coins in the British Museum today. So Jesus makes the point then, give back to Caesar what is rightfully his. Both the Pharisees and the Herodians were obsessed with the riches on offer in the world, the riches of Caesar. The Herodians wanted to game the system to get power and wealth, and the Pharisees wanted to replace the system in order to get power and wealth. In fact, we know exactly what the Pharisees were like from chapter 7. They would manipulate people. They would change the law to get money out of people. They would rob widows' houses. They were no better than Caesar. These men had enslaved the people in their own way. Not with sword and empire, but the Pharisees had done it with religion. So Jesus says, look, this is the system in which you thrived, so obey the rules of the system. Give to Caesar what is Caesar's. What about us today? Well, have we become obsessed with little silver coins? I preached this to myself, I said during the prayer, right? Hands up if you've ever been caught out whilst driving your car and you've got a little letter through the door, a PNC. Anyone? Oh, you're all good drivers. Oh, okay. Well, you get one of these dreaded penalty charge notices, don't you, through your door? And you think, great, what have I done this time? And if it's Lewisham, like it is for me, normally it's because I've driven down a school street, a street that sometimes you can drive down, but other times you can't drive down them. And of course, no two school zones are the same, are they? Some operate at 8:30 to 9:30, some start at 8:45 to 9:45, some last half an hour, some last 40 minutes. They deliberately try and catch people out. And the signs, well, there's so much information on there, you ain't got time to read them, do you? And you think, well, I could drive down this street last year, what's suddenly changed? And now you think, oh, they've got me. And you're so upset, you're so angry, aren't you? And you think, well, 60 quid for driving down the wrong street. I can't afford that. And there's no grace, there's no second chances. And for some reason, the police can drive down there just fine. So it's one rule for them, one rule for us. And you want to scream, don't you? This is unjust. You're already paying a fortune in fuel duty and road tax. And your car costs a bomb anyway. Well, look, this morning, God asks me, Steve, why are you angry about little silver coins? Why are you so angry about an empire that before our very eyes is coming apart at the seams? Why are you so concerned with a currency that one day is going to end up in a museum? A currency that holds no weight where it really matters. See, in the new heaven and the new earth, these plastic tenors, plastic money with its holograms and its magnetic strips and fancy Royal Mint manufacturing, it's going to be worthless. It's going to be like monopoly money. That's why in Matthew 6, Jesus says, do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moths and vermin destroy it and where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven where moth and vermin do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. If our hearts are in the right place, we won't throw tantrums when it comes to paying taxes. Give back to Caesar the things which are Caesar's. And trust me, it really hurts to say this. Give back to Sadiq the things that are Sadiq's. Give back to Rachel and Keir the things that belong to them. Pay your taxes and your rates and your parking fines. It's only money. It will not last. But of course, that's not the only thing Jesus says, is it? It's not simply a case of honouring the emperor or government of the day. Because Jesus draws our attention to a far more serious obligation. That's our third point. Oh, the third point's already come up, and now I've given away the solar system. There it is. Render to God, verse 17. Jesus said to them, render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. And they marvelled at him. Why were the Pharisees and Herodians obliged to pay the poll tax? Well, it's because Caesar's simply asking for his coins back. They have his image on them, Jesus says. So if Caesar says, give me back my stuff, then Jesus says you ought to give it back to him. And no one disagrees with Jesus' argument, do they? Jesus has got them. They're amazed. They can't believe he's answered like this. But what does Jesus mean when he says, give back to God then? Give back to God the things which belong to him. What belongs to God? Well, it's interesting what Jesus says when looking at these coins, isn't it? He asks, whose image is this? He doesn't say, whose face is it? He could have said that, but he doesn't. He asks whose image. And it's Caesar's image which is printed on the coin. And therefore, ultimately, the coin belongs to him. So what belongs to God then? Where is God's image found? Where has God imprinted his image? What's the answer? On us. Quite simply, he's imprinted his image on you and on me. Genesis 1:27, God created mankind in his own image. These days, if you want to capture the image of someone, you just point your camera at them, don't you, and just start snapping away. But back in the day, it was a much more complicated affair. Talked about Trafalgar Square. If you ever get a chance, go to the National Portrait Gallery. It's free, it's pretty interesting. And of course, there are thousands of portraits in the Portrait Gallery. Images of famous people on canvas. And each portrait had an artist who tried to capture the soul of the person they were painting. Well, in a strange way, human beings are God's little self-portrait. That's what separates us from the animals. We have godlike characteristics. God has carefully painted his character onto the heart of every human being. Did you realise that? So human beings are capable of great love. We're geared towards love. We can show love to one another. We've a desire to bring order and control out of chaos. We've got an inbuilt sense of what's right and what's wrong. We demand justice. We strive for fairness. And we're creative, aren't we? We paint beautiful pictures. We write lovely music. We design amazing buildings. And we actually strive and value beauty. Not because it achieves anything, but simply because it's beautiful. And we do all of these things because we are godlike in our design. As we look at our fellow human beings, we're to see the artistry of God's. He's painted us different colours with different cultures, different talents, but each one of us bears his image. Now, of course, sin has disfigured that image. We're no longer a true representation of what God is like. If we're to mirror God, well, now we're like a smashed mirror. The characteristics of God have been warped and splintered. That's why there's so much evil in the world, because human beings have stopped acting in a godlike way. We're no longer perfect reflections of his character. But nevertheless, the image hasn't been lost altogether. So do you see Jesus' point? If the coin bearing Caesar's image belongs to Caesar, then we who bear God's image belong to God's. We ought to give little silver coins back to Caesar because they bear his image. Well, then what's God asking of us? Not little silver coins. God is demanding much, much more. Jesus demands that we put God at the very centre of our lives. Our bodies, our energies, our desires should be focused on serving him. He owns us. He is the emperor's emperor. He is the king of kings. Serving God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind and your strength is nothing less than the minimal requirement. We belong to God, so give him what he's owed, says Jesus. And look at the response of the Pharisees and the Herodians. They're amazed. They marvel at him. His answer has left them open-mouthed. He's answered their question, pay your taxes, but he's called them to something much bigger. Give God the place that he deserves in your life. Well, simple question to finish with then is this: are you giving God what he's owed? When Caesar demands taxes from the people in the empire, he's got absolutely no concern for their well-being, has he? Caesar's a wicked tyrant. He's only interested in making his own life better. He doesn't care who he steps on. He doesn't care who gets hurt. He doesn't really care who starves to death. But look, this is crucially important. We need to understand that when God demands our lives be lived for him, he's not doing it from the position of a vicious tyrant. God doesn't demand our service with the intention of ruining our lives. In fact, the opposite is true. So, think about our solar system. Here it is. As most of us hopefully know, all right, the sun sits at the centre of our solar system, and the earth revolves around the sun. And because of that science, right, the earth spins at a certain rate, and the days are a certain time, and therefore the earth is in the best possible place it can be. That's where God's put it. But imagine if there's some crazy mad scientist, right, and he thinks, no, this is all wrong. No, the earth should be at the centre of the solar system. The sun is selfish thinking it should be at the centre. So we're going to put the earth where the sun is. Imagine if they managed to achieve that. Well, there'd be chaos, wouldn't there? Suddenly planets would start smashing into each other. Gravity would be messed up. We'd float off into space. The moon would just whiz out somewhere. And the earth would stop spinning. Very quickly, darkness and death would take over. Well, look, when God commands us to love him, to give him wholehearted devotion, to put him at the centre of our lives, he's doing it not because he needs anything from us, or not because he can't cope without us. God doesn't need us at all. He is self-sufficient. No, God commands our obedient service because he loves us. Living in humble obedience to God is the best place for a human being to be. See, the world gets it the wrong way round, don't they? They see God's laws as restricting. They see God as some sort of killjoy. They say, well, for example, God can't expect me to control myself sexually. How dare he? God can't tell me not to get drunk or overeat or treat people kindly. God has no right to enforce his laws on me. But what do we see when people remove God's and his laws from the centre of their lives? Well, quite frankly, we see what's going on in Britain today. 16,344 knife crimes in London so far this year. Over 1 million women estimated to have experienced domestic violence, drug addiction, alcoholism, suicide at record levels. And we know that as a society we've got 1,001 other problems. Drifting away from God has cost our society and our country dear. We've wanted to put ourselves at the centre rather than him. Replacing God with the temporary things of this world leads to chaos and darkness and despair. And what's true of society is true for each individual Christian, isn't it? Christian friend, don't make the same mistake. Understand that wholehearted service to God the Father is not just the minimum requirement, but it's the only thing that's going to give us long-lasting joy and fulfillment. Render to God what belongs to God. Remember, God is not a tyrant. He's not a party pooper who wants to make your life a misery. Far from it. The God who we serve has wonderful plans for us. And he gets to make demands on our lives because Jesus gave us his life. The God we serve took on flesh to die for us. Jesus came to perfectly demonstrate the beauty and the majesty and the love of the Father. Paul says in Colossians 1, Jesus the Son is the image of the invisible God. God was pleased to have all his fullness dwell in him, and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether on earth or things in heaven, by making peace through his blood shed on the cross. God has not only made us in his own image, but even after we destroyed that image through our sin and our rebellion, God was still determined to buy us back, to reconcile us, to redeem us, to remake us. We not only bear the image of God the Father, but now we've been purchased through the blood of God the Son. We're now sealed and kept by his Holy Spirit. Christian friend, your life is no longer your own. Have you realized that yet? You are now a servant of the most powerful, most wonderful King imaginable. A king who died so that you could live. You belong to King Jesus, our Lord and our God's. So render to God what belongs to God. Amen.